Today, U.S. returned to South China Sea of huge missile destroyer to kill aggression. United States has announced the return of USS Barry, a guided missile destroyer, to South China Sea to carry out security missions, sparking fears of an open conflict in the disputed waters. The reintroduction of the Arleigh Burke-class vessel was unveiled on Saturday on the U.S. Pacific Fleet's official website. According to the statement, the USS Barry will help promote peace and stability in the territory. Commander Chris Gall, Barry's commanding officer, said, "A continued presence in the South China Sea is vital in maintaining a free and open Indo-Pacific. The freedom of all nations to navigate in international waters is critically important." Barry's transit of the Taiwan Strait yesterday ensured the right and instills the confidence of all nations to trade and communicate in the South China Sea. Of the vessel's purpose, Lieutenant J.G. Jordan Brooks, one of Barry's officers of the deck, said, "It is incredible the number of fishing boats and merchants who pass through and conduct their business in these waters every day. To accomplish our mission safely, effectively and professionally, Barry constantly works as a team and is always alert and communicating." U.S. Navy guided missile destroyers in the Destroyer Squadron 15, the largest U.S. of its kind, have constantly stayed in the territory. This month marks the fifth time of the 2020 deployment that Barry has carried out routine missions in the region. Lieutenant Commander Timothy Baker, Barry's Plans and Tactics Officer, said, "This past April, Barry conducted a Freedom of Navigation or FON operation around the Paracel Islands and then rendezvoused with the USS America Expeditionary Strike Group for operations in the South China Sea." Whether operating independently or as a part of a larger group, Barry serves as a highly visible symbol of the overwhelming force the United States can deploy to defeat aggression. The reveal comes as the U.S. called on other nations to oppose China's dominance in the disputed waters after Beijing built military bases on the atolls. David Faith, Deputy Assistant Secretary for Regional and Security Policy and Multilateral Affairs at the U.S. Bureau of East Asian and Pacific Affairs, said Washington would increase the number of shipwrighter accords to counter China's aggressive behavior. Mr. Faith said, "In some areas, such as the Northern Pacific, stateless fishing vessels display characteristics of Chinese registration. In addition, China's maritime militia, estimated to include more than 3,000 vessels, actively carries out aggressive behavior on the high seas and in sovereign waters of other nations to coerce and intimidate legitimate fishers in support of the Chinese Communist Party's long-term maritime strategic goals." Under the shipwrighter agreement, one nation's authorities are allowed to board law enforcement vessels or aircraft of another country's while on patrol. The move to police illegal fishing created concerns among several allies of the U.S. who are members of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations or ASEAN. Gilang Kembara, researcher at the Center for Strategic and International Studies in Indonesia, said Jakarta would not approve of a militaristic move by the U.S. He said, "He think it's a good thing if the U.S. offers Indonesia cooperation with their Coast Guard, since the IUU fishing is a criminal activity, so we need law enforcement to fight it. But if what they offer is cooperation with the U.S. Navy, and this becomes a military issue, that approach is overblown because I don't think IUU fishing is an existential threat to a nation." J.L. Batongbakal, director at the University of the Philippines Institute for Maritime Affairs and Law of the Sea, warned of a potential opposition also from the Philippines. He added, "But Manila will probably be satisfied with information sharing on activities at sea, and for at least the last 2 to 3 years the government, especially the Fisheries Bureau, has actually taken advantage of information available from the U.S. on foreign fishing activities in the Philippine Exclusive Economic Zone or EEZ." Meanwhile, U.S. President Donald Trump's administration provided precision-guided missiles and other weapons to help the Philippines battle Islamic State group-aligned militants and renewed a pledge to defend its treaty ally if it comes under attack in the disputed South China Sea. National Security Advisor Robert O'Brien represented Trump in Monday's ceremony at the Department of Foreign Affairs in Manila, where he announced the delivery of the missiles and bombs to the Philippine military. Trump pledged to provide the $18 million worth of missiles in a phone conversation with Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte in April, Foreign Secretary Teodoro Locsin Jr. said. O'Brien expressed condolences to the Philippines after back-to-back typhoons left a trail of death and devastation in the country and outlined U.S. help to the country to fight the coronavirus pandemic. The U.S. assistance projects normalcy in Washington's foreign relations as Trump works to challenge the results of the November 3 presidential election, claiming he was a victim of fraud. Duterte had asked Filipino Americans to vote for Trump but congratulated Joe Biden, through his spokesperson, for winning the election. Asked in an online news briefing if any of the officials he met in Vietnam and the Philippines voiced concern about the post-election situation in the U.S., O'Brien said nobody did. There will be a transition if the courts don't rule in President Trump's favor, he said. O'Brien represented Trump in a recent online summit between the U.S. and leaders of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations and an expanded East Asia summit of heads of state attended by China and Russia that was also held by video and hosted by Vietnam. In his remarks at the turnover of the U.S. missiles in Manila, O'Brien cited the Trump administration's role in the defeat of the Islamic State group in the Middle East and last year's killing of its leader, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, in Syria, and renewed its commitment to help defeat as-linked militants in the southern Philippines. President Trump is standing with President Duterte as we combat ISIS here in Southeast Asia, O'Brien said. This transfer underscores our strong and enduring commitment to our critical alliance. He expressed hope for the continuance of a key security agreement that allows American forces to train in large-scale combat exercises in the Philippines. Duterte moved to abrogate the Visiting Forces Agreement with the U.S. early this year but later delayed the effectivity of his decision to next year, a move welcomed by O'Brien. He said the U.S. stands with the Philippines in its effort to protect its sovereign rights in the South China Sea. The Philippines announced last month that it would resume oil and gas explorations in or near Reed Bank, which lies off the country's western coast and is also claimed by China. They belong to the Philippine people. They don't belong to some other country that just because they may be bigger than the Philippines they can come take away and convert the resources of the Philippine people. That's just wrong, O'Brien said. He repeated U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo's statement early this year that any armed attack on Philippine forces aircraft or public vessels in the South China Sea will trigger our mutual defense obligations. The Allies have a 69-year-old mutual defense treaty. In July, Pompeo escalated the Trump administration's attacks against China by declaring that Washington regards virtually all Chinese maritime claims in the disputed waterway as illegitimate. China reacted angrily by accusing the U.S. of sowing discord between Beijing and neighboring Asian states.